Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining Dorsey Ross on this episode of The Dorsey Ross Show. In this episode, Dorsey interviews another special guest that will give you hope and inspire you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining me on another episode of The Dorsey Ross Show. Today, we have a special guest with us. Her name is Laura Buckley, who is a devoted Christian writer who is committed to exploring the profound aspects of faith and spirituality with a deep-rooted belief in the power of God and unshakable trust in His divine plan. Laura has dedicated her literacy journey to sharing the Christian message of hope, trust, and unwavering faith with readers around the world. Laura has embarked on a mission to provide readers with a solid foundation for their faith journey. Her current book, an insightful exploration titled 21 Reasons for Trusting in God, serves as a beacon of enlightenment, offering spiritual guidance and tangible proof to reinforce the reader's confidence in God's provision and love. Laura's unique approach combines thorough research, personal reflection, and a passion for connecting with readers on a soul deep level. Her writing seeks to create a safe and welcoming space for individuals seeking spiritual understanding and a closer relationship with the divine. Laura, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you, Dorsey, for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And as my guests know, I always open up with a icebreaker question. And today's icebreaker question is, what's the best compliment you ever received?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. The best compliment I've ever received. Okay, I'm going to have to go with the best, most recent compliment I've received. One of the ladies from my church, she's in my choir group. I've been getting her to read the book for a while. She said she's going to. She finally started reading it, and she came to me in just complete, utter, awe. It's the only way I can describe it. She looked at me and she said, "Laura, that is an amazing book you've written. So insightful, so well written. I can't believe it." And and part of me goes, well, okay, do people not think that I can do that? Or, but she was so sincere, so absolutely sincere that, it's like, and when people come to you and tell you that you did something great and wonderful, then, it's nothing but, you know, inspiring to myself. So
Right. Why are you passionate about what you do?
I think I'm passionate because of my son. So to give you a little information about, how I got to where I am with writing this book, my son, who's a very loving, kind, big-hearted young man, about 6 years ago, when he was about 16 or so, he came to me one day and he said, "Mom, I don't think I believe anymore." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And it took him a lot of strength to come to me and tell me that. And we talked about it for like a good hour, I would say, about, what made him not believe. And he's gone to church, he went to religious ed classes, he in his school, he was a scientific, type kid and very much into those type of classes, computer, etc. And he had classmates that just simply didn't believe. And apparently a lot of stuff that they teach in school is very non God, supernatural, non any. And for him, that's what he was hearing. That's what he heard. So the last thing I told him was, if I can find information, and he wanted some proof, some tangible proof. And he goes, "If I can find you something, would you listen to me?" Would you, listen to what I'm telling you? And he goes, yes. So it took me a little while, and I put together some information for him, and got that information in front of him, including this ginormous book of scientific proof for him, because that's what he was into. But we watched, like a video and went through some different, basically, it was more of the artifacts type thing and where, all the different manuscripts are. And that the fact that this stuff is still there, still, tangibly there. And then I guess he only read like one chapter of that scientific book and he ended up going, okay, if they can write that long of a book over scientific proof, I'm good. I'm good. So, yeah. And that wasn't the start of it. That was just kind of like, okay, that's cool. But then I realized with my research and with his, knowledge, I was like, wait a minute. There's nothing out there for these young adults to grab a hold of and say in a fairly short, respectively, attention span to go, okay, here's a reason to believe, here's a reason to believe, here's a reason to believe. Because it's just like I said, that big, thick book type thing on one subject or, just a couple subjects. And these kids just need something to go, should I believe or not believe? And then at that point, then you take it from there and go, okay, I believe now, where do I want to go as far as my knowledge and further research? I like this idea. I like what was presented. I want to go the scientific way. I want to go the historic way, or I want to go, just, into the church and go from there. So, yeah.
Was the book that your son read? What do you remember the title of it and who wrote it? And was it based on the Christian faith, or was it just a secular book that somebody came up with?
I do not have that book in front of me. So I apologize. I don't have that. It was definitely just a huge scientific book. For him, he said, he understood the first chapter, but it was really hard, to really understand. He goes, there's no way somebody would just pick up this book and read this and feel like, hey, oh, that makes sense to me. And as far as, it was, I don't know if I want to say it was Christian based because honestly, I didn't read it because it was just too much for me. I'm not of that mindset. But, it just kind of proved that there was a God. And I think science nowadays have gone to that point or gone further to that point of, oh, well, because we cannot prove that there isn't a God, and because certain things we cannot explain in our scientific research, there's got to be something that's larger than, the Big Bang theory or whatever they're going with at the time that shows that there's something out there that started this, that caused this, caused that, at least that initial reaction, the initial start to the universe, and our DNA and how our DNA is made up and so unique for each person. 3 billion letters long the DNA is. I mean, this stuff doesn't just pop out of the air. And I think that's what the scientists are now saying. They're like, this kind of stuff we can't reproduce. We can't make this happen. This isn't something that there's something else that influenced this and caused this.
You mentioned that you wrote a book and it's called 21 Reasons for Trusting in God. Can you give us 5 of those reasons why we should trust in God?
Oh, sure. Well, so if you want like that proof type thing, there's 100,000 artifacts in existence that will prove the biblical during the time of Jesus, that the whole gospel, like it goes back to different sections of the gospel and proves the gospel. So that's an amazing number of artifacts that that are there and available. And I mentioned the DNA. The DNA is one of the other things that kind of proves God's existence because they can't reproduce that. That information is just unreproducible. So that's a great one. One of the things that they talk about a lot in the philosophical end of things is that there has to be a cause. So if something exists, something caused it to exist. And this is more of a mental twister type thing, that a lot of people don't get into, but, some do, where if there is something that exists, there had to be a cause. Therefore, if it does exist, there was a cause. What was that cause? And that's kind of a logical explanation for God. Okay. Other things are miracles. Miracles are huge. And I don't think I don't want to say in the news enough, but they're not readily available enough because they happen on a very regular basis. And we just don't hear about them, don't know about them. I'm sure a lot of doctors probably, maybe, know about some of those that happen, in the hospital. But there's things that happen outside the hospital, whether it be at Lourdes or just a prayer, going into a church, that happen all the time. And there's no way to explain it. No way to explain it except that there is somebody larger than us that is looking out for us, protecting us, and caring for us. So to me, that's a huge proof as well, because I've had that happen in my own life. And then, if you want another one, it's just health wise. If you don't believe in God and don't have that trust in something protecting you and looking out for you, you can get really, I think, mentally kind of messed up. You can get kind of really, into your head thinking about all this stuff, and that causes physical reactions. And so they have proven through different studies that when people believe in a God, believe in his protection, believe in his love, they calm down, their blood pressure goes down, they accept things better, they feel better, they can handle things better. And honestly, just the peace that it brings me, I I there's nothing else that can cause that. There's nothing else that can cause that. So those are just some quick overviews, I guess, that I just gave you. But yeah.
Going back to the artifact that you mentioned that they found, in the Bible readings and, during, for the Bible times, I was doing a, youth group study on certain videos, and they were talking about that they haven't excavated. They only excavated 5% of the whole area of the Bible, for the Bible times.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So there's probably so much more there that we just don't have in our hands. I know they found the cross, and there was a miracle that happened when they first found the cross. And it was kind of how they tested, because there was three crosses, right? And there's three crosses there, with the two thieves and then Jesus in the middle. And they all were kind of made of the same material. They knew that it was a material from back then. But what they did is they had a lady who, I don't know what her symptoms were. I don't remember at this point in time. Sick in some way, needed some sort of healing in some way. And they touched the crosses, and when she touched what they now say is Jesus's original, the cross that he was crucified on, she was healed. And so that's how they knew. And there's more healings that have happened since then. The cross has actually been splintered and pulled apart, and I wish it hadn't. That just makes me cringe a little bit. But there's pieces of the cross that have been on display throughout the world. And, people have used that kind of just like touching his cloak when he was alive or whatever. So, yeah.
Tell us about your first miracle at 15.
Sure. So this was a big, okay, there's a God, because I believed in God before that. I believed through, what my parents taught me through going to church. But when I was 15, I was with my friend in a car. She was out just of driving age. I didn't have a seatbelt on because her seatbelt didn't work. I tried. This was when seatbelts were fairly new as well. So it was no big deal for me not to have a seatbelt on. But she was driving us back home, and she was talking to me, just kind of looking at me. And I kind of looked up, and I saw in front of me the light was red and a car coming through. And there was no time for her to react. We were going straight into the car. We went straight into the car and straight into a tree. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was passed out and laying on my friend's lap. So I was actually over in the driver's side. And these were big cars back then, not to age myself too much here. But I had looked in the window, and this is what I remember. I looked in the window, and there was a gentleman there, and he just looked at me and he goes, "Are you okay?" And I just kind of responded, "Yes." The next thing I know, I was waking up, saw myself on my friend's lap, got myself, back together. For whatever reason, my reaction was starting to pick up my purse because my stuff flew everywhere. And, we had then I could hear the ambulance and everything coming. They were quickly coming. And they came up to the window and they were asking us if we were okay at this point. My friend, kind of came back too. Um, and we're like, "Yeah, we're okay. Where's the guy? Where's the guy that was just here?" This guy was just here and he asked me if I was okay already. They're looking around and they're like, "There's nobody else here. We're the first ones on the scene. Nobody's standing around that looks like the gentleman that I described to them." So he wasn't there. To kind of further on the story, what really kind of put it at home is that when they took the car in to the junkyard, because the car was totaled, our car was totaled, which neither of us were injured, by the way, not, anything big, just sore. Took the car into the junkyard manager said, "Hey, I'm so sorry for your loss." And they're like, "What are you talking about?" And they said, well, the junkyard manager said, "Well, the person that went through the windshield on the passenger side, you know, obviously passed away. I've never seen anybody live, hitting the windshield like that." And they're like, "No, she's perfectly fine at home, just a little sore." So that just kind of that whole combination of seeing that figure in the window and then knowing that I hit that windshield so hard that they thought I should have passed away, that just kind of really made me feel like, okay, there's somebody watching out for me. And my parents, my mom even said, "There's a reason why you're still alive."
Yeah. Now, could that person that was by the window that asking you, "Are you okay?" Could it have been the other driver or somebody else from the other car, or was that disproven?
Yeah, the other car, there was a lady driving, nobody else, just a lady driving that car. She did get in the ambulance, but she was okay in the end. I don't know the whole story because it was my friend's car and her driving, but she wasn't, hurt to the point where she was, she went home that night later too. There was nobody standing around. If somebody's going to come up to your car and say, "Are you okay?" And, the fireman, he's like, "We're the first ones on the scene. There's nobody else here." They don't just disappear that quickly. So, and typically if somebody was wanting to check on you if you're okay, they'd kind of watch out and stand around and, you know, yeah. Yeah. So I truly believe it was an angel of some sort. So,
No, I read on your bio and on your website that as you got older in your college years, you started to drift away a little bit from from God or from your belief in God, and why was that?
college years are really hard, I think, for a lot of people. You want to you want to play the college role. You want to enjoy yourself, you want to you're studying, you're meeting new people, you're trying to get used to living in a dorm room with somebody else. So the last thing you usually do is just get up and go, "Okay, I'm going to go to church this morning." It just doesn't, I don't know why, it doesn't always connect with people. But that kind of, I felt it. I felt immediately when I was started doing that. I was like, "Oh man, I miss that connection. I miss going to church." And it's an interesting thing because you just kind of, that connection, that community that you have at church dissipates so quickly if you're not going on a regular basis. So I think, that just really hit home for me. I felt like I needed to go and I did try to go. I think I, tried to go on occasion, went to a couple activities that they had, in the social hall type thing. And luckily I found a group of friends in our dorm that were very Christian and they helped, introduce me to music, and we went and visited other churches and kind of recentered myself to saying, "Okay, yeah, yep, I got to keep God in the forefront, or at least somewhere nearby.
In your book that we mentioned earlier, you talked about trusting in God. How do you personally define and practice trust in your daily life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think putting trust in God is really a long-term, everyday thing that you have to work on. It's not, you know, I trust that He is looking over my activities and what I do. Now, I haven't always been that way. Um, there was a long time where I felt like, okay, I believe in God. It's good. I believe in Jesus. It's good. But I'm, walking through life like a lot of people do, just walking through life, doing my own thing, whether it be, work, friends, whatever I'm doing, family, etc. But at least in those days, I wasn't giving my all to God. I wasn't giving my heart, my soul to God. And honestly, since I wrote the book, between the time that I started writing the book and even till just within the last couple months, I really just now feel like, okay, I know what it means to trust in God because I had to get really close to Him. And I feel like people need to really realize that being close to God means talking to Him, not just once a day, not just, okay, I'm going to say a quick prayer, in the morning, the Our Father in the evening, and I'm done. It's a relationship, and that relationship has to be fostered just like any other relationship. It's not that He's not there for you. It's not that He doesn't love you and wants to have that relationship, but you have to put that effort in for Him to really, for you to hear Him and connect with Him. It's your end that can't connect sometimes, I think, with God enough that you can really feel that full trust and that full love. It's hard to explain, but you'll feel it inside. You'll feel it inside and you'll know it. You'll know it.
Yeah.
But every day now, I just, I ask Him for His guidance. I ask Him for Him to protect me, to show me what to do for that day. And then at the end of the day, just kind of say, did I do the right thing? Please help me to do better tomorrow. Yeah.
If, for people that are listening that may feel like they lack trust in God, how would what encouragement would you give to them to help them to trust in God more?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, as a selfish point, I would say read the book. Okay. Just because trusting, first of all, comes with belief. Okay. You can't trust in somebody, until you're friends with somebody, know somebody, you don't put your trust in them completely. So you have to get to know them first. You have to go through that process of who is God? Why should I believe in Him? Now I believe, what do I do with this belief? Where do I go with this belief? How am I supposed to connect with Him? How does He help me? Where do I connect? How do I serve Him? Or how do I, what is my next steps? And all this has to come, and it's kind of sequential, I believe, in your life to then, once you get all those pieces put together, that relationship is really kind of stronger because then you know in your heart that, oh, God is real. I can put my faith in Him. I know He's there for me. And you just go through that process of, for me, and I'm just going to be, Dorsey, this was one of the things that I did after I wrote the book. I'm like, it brought up more questions. And that's why in the book, I say quite often, that's okay. Questions are good. Questions are good. Because I needed those questions to continue my research, to continue my journey, to continue my belief myself, because all these questions popped up. So those questions, once I got, started answering those questions that I had, then I knew, okay, now I got my answers. Now I know. Now I completely 100% am there. And I think everybody has a different journey. Everybody's going to have a different, time frame in which they go through. But you have to go through it. You have to keep fighting for it and keep learning and answer those questions and find that relationship with our Lord.
What challenges did you face while writing the book, and how did you faith guide you through those challenges?
So challenges. You know, Faith had to be there to write the book. So challenges for me were mentally, am I doing the right thing? Am I hearing God? Is this what God wants me to write? I feel like I was being challenged by friends as well, challenged by just what was happening in my world around me, whether it be finances, trying to find money to, to produce the book, whether it be just time frame that it took me to write the book compared to what I wanted. And just, I felt like I was constantly being barraged by questioning myself. And I don't know that it was God questioning. I don't know. I think there was other forces making me do that. Okay. So I think there's, good and evil in this world, and the evil didn't want me to write the book. So yeah, those challenges were there. And it took actually my husband, he finally looked at me and goes, "We talked about this, Laura, that when you write this book, that he's not going to like it, that, that Satan's going to be there, and he's going to take you on a journey himself. And that's what this is right now. So go back to God and don't let him take over." So those were the big, that was a big challenge.
Right. Tell us about the accident your husband had.
Oh, and this is interesting, Dorsey, because just before we got on this podcast, I'm like, that's right, I forgot, because the accident took over my mind at the time. And 2 days before, so it was on a weekend, that my husband went up to see his mom. And when he went up there, he had stopped and eaten something, but he had just started a new medicine. And when he got up there, he started feeling bad. The next day, he's like calling me going, "I don't feel good. I've been throwing up. I got something. I don't know if it was the food I ate, etc." About 4 hours later, I got this phone call saying from his mom going, "Okay, took him to the hospital because he couldn't breathe. And he was having such a severe allergic reaction that he went into that anaphylactic shock stage where he couldn't breathe." So I thought I lost him then. And he comes home Sunday night. We go out to dinner. And Monday, he falls off a ladder 2 stories high. And he ended up just totally blasting both of, in the bottom half of your leg. Don't ask me to remember the names of those 2 bones back down there, but right below his knee, both of those bones just were completely shattered to the point where they couldn't count the pieces when they were in there trying to put them back together. He had I cannot say the word, the carpmental syndrome, where they, like inside your body, it tries to kill that part of your body because it's just too much for your body. And it says, okay, I'm going to get rid of that part of my body. And so they had to go in and do a first surgery just to take care of that. 2 weeks later, they finally had him put back together. They had a bunch of, pieces of metal in him, put him back together. Okay, great. So he had a long haul trying to heal, and he was starting to go to get his therapy. And the next thing you know, he has an infection. And the infection meant that they had to take out all those pieces of metal in him. And the doctor at this time had been talking to me beforehand, but, kind of really at this particular stage said, "Laura, we're likely going to have to remove his leg because it's not going to heal properly. There's so much damage. There's so much pain that he's going to have. Being able to walk is going to be a struggle. Just letting you know to be prepared for this." But of course, we didn't tell my husband, because why would you tell somebody that might happen to them, right? You want them to fight as best they could. So he fought through it. And to all of us, including the doctor, our surprise is that he walks basically normal. I mean, if you don't really look for it, you don't know it's there, right? There's a separation between his right knee and his left knee as far as height goes. But right now, it's not affecting him. He tons of scars, obviously, on his leg, but he can walk normally. And the doctor said, no, there's something higher, something bigger looking out for you, because there was no way that that was me.
Amen.
So, yeah.
You've been through a lot in your life, and your family's been through a lot in their life. Yet you still grew closer to God. When someone maybe would even walk away and say, God's not real, God's not in this, why is he throwing this all at me at one time? I can't handle this anymore. But why would you, or why was it that you grew closer to God?
Yeah, and that's true, and I think a lot of people would, and I was there. I was there. I was almost there. So, I think it's hard depending on where you're at. God gives you just enough things and gives you enough strength to get through things, right? And my things were not as bad as other people's. I mean, I just can't imagine some people's trials that they go through, but the trials are there for a reason. And I knew it after my husband fell off the roof. And when he was healing, I was like, there's something bigger, something bigger. God's testing us right now, and he's preparing us. And I think the breaking point was when my mom unexpectedly passed. At that time, we were just over COVID. We were just over COVID. So you weren't, going to church. We weren't doing the things like you normally do. And I kind of just, probably like a lot of people, kind of fell away from God a little bit then too, because you just didn't have that community. You just didn't have that constant reminder and practice and activity. And I was there. I was there. I had lost not only my mom, but my dad has Alzheimer's, dementia, heart issues. So he needed a lot of care. So we were taking turns caring for him. My sisters got angry at me, which we were all angry at the time, obviously. But I felt like I lost everything between, you know, COVID and not being at church, between my mom gone, my dad really wasn't there, that as far as being able to talk to my sisters, not being upset with me. And we had moved. We had moved too. So I had moved away from friends and people that I knew. I thought I lost everything. I thought, why? Why, God? Why am I going through this? Why is this happening? There is I can't handle this. I just can't handle this. And I've never said this before. I'm not sure I feel comfortable saying this, but I was seriously there where I've thought about running off the road. I thought about taking my own life. I didn't. And I sat on the side of the road crying, shaking, and I had two people pull over. Why? I don't know. God was putting them in my life, and they talked to me. They were very kind, very listening. And I just went home and I'm like, okay, God, I give it all to you. I'm done. I can't. Tell me where to go. It's up to you. You have to control this. I can't do this anymore. And that was it. That was the change. That's when it wasn't until I surrendered completely to him and said, I can't do this. You do this. I can't do it. That God just immediately, and I felt so much better immediately. There's like a relief, that weight was taken off my shoulder.
Right. Can you share with us a memorable story from your own life that illustrates the power of faith and trust in God?
Oh, a rememberable story. You know, there's a lot of stories, obviously, that were very impactful in my life. I'm going to have to use something that happened more recently than not. So, one of the things that made me just trust in God is that I was in there with my dad after my mom had passed that night. And my mom had, I don't know if you've ever seen or heard of those like little dolls that are like cats and dogs, and they're sitting on a little mat and they're breathing, and they're purring and whatever. They're just, mechanical things, whatever. So this little cat hadn't purred in years. My mom could not get it to purr. It basically was done, mechanically was done. That night, I heard this sound, and my dad said, I said, "What is that sound?" And he goes, "It's the cat. It's purring." I'm like, "What are you talking about? It hadn't purred in years." And I felt like that was, you know, mom doing that, my mom doing that for me. And she did it for my sisters too, because it stopped. By the next morning, wasn't purring anymore, wasn't moving anymore. And that next night, it did the same thing for my sisters. They were there, and it started purring, and it hasn't purred or breathed since then. So it's just these awesome things that happen in your life, and it doesn't have to be that big. It can be something small, like you just look up and you see the beauty of the glistening of the icicles on the tree, or you're looking like, I love trees. I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, it's a beautiful big tree. God made these things, and just those little things, those little hints of, hey, I'm here, and I love you and I'm here. And you don't see him unless you believe in him. And then all of a sudden it's like all these lovely things just happen to you.
Yeah. Well, as we get ready to end, I always ask my guests to give my listeners an encouraging word about, whatever you feel led to share.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess, my encouragement is for specifically, for those that are either questioning their belief or are not believers, is to make sure you do the research. Because when you do that research and you see both sides, that's when you learn. That's when you grow. That's when you start questioning more and can find out more about God and faith and love. And that's what God is. God is love. And I just encourage you to, if you have questions, continue to follow those questions and find answers. Talk to somebody, go to your church pastor, and just talk to somebody about it and keep searching and praying. You'll get your answer.
Amen. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. We greatly appreciate having you.
Oh, well, thank you, Dorsey. I'm so glad I came on. I really appreciate it. It was a very nice conversation with you.
Absolutely. Well, guys and girls, thank you so much for coming on and for listening. Please like and share this episode, and please continue to listen, and we'll put a link to also her website so you can connect with her. And until next time, God bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you again for joining Dorsey Ross on this episode of The Dorsey Ross Show. Please like, share, and tell others about the show. Also, please check out the other podcast episodes. And if you would like, donate to this podcast and buy Dorsey a coffee. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.